Ruben and I were at a recent NAMM conference and we ran into Mike Pepe and we started talking about producer-mixer relationships. Mike is a producer-mixer and one thing led to another and we said, let's make a video so that we can show you exactly what it's like when a producer-mixer comes into the room, the challenges, the types of things that build a relationship, the kind of places to go, the kind of places not to go, everything involved in putting up a mix, checking it out, talking about the challenges of it so that at the end, the fans get something that they can completely relate to.
First of all, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it. Facility is beautiful, so gorgeous.
Thanks for coming. These days, more now than ever, it's become an unattended world. It's kind of a nice little treat to have somebody actually sitting here in the flesh.
Yes.
You know, through COVID, it really made it more that way. Even now we're doing things like audio movers and Zoom links so we can have these virtual attended sessions and it works out great, but it's kind of a nice thing to actually have a person in the studio talking about where they came to, how they came to those decisions, all the things that come along the way, the artist involvement.
Well, I prefer attending mastering sessions when I can because, well, one, I'm not very good at emailing. So like, I know, like when I send out something from, to master and I write this long email, I feel like it's a bit obtuse, this long email with like, oh, this and that, and the artist is, but when I'm sitting here, I can just very fluently be like, oh yeah, well, the artist really and I were going for this. And it's a very like natural conversation that I feel like has to happen rather than sending something out for mastering, getting it back and be like, yeah, it sounds great. I don't necessarily know if I was there, if it would be different, but maybe, I mean, possibly.
That always actually comes up. Everything sounds great, but would there have been some influence to go in 100%. Some other direction?
Yes.
And that's a very valid thing. So that's one of the benefits of having an attended session. However, there's challenges to that because the budgets are what they are and people have to stack up work these days.
Yes.
So there's a constant balancing act when it comes to that. One of the things that I've noticed when people do come is if you're working in the rock and roll environment, it can look like, hey, it's loose, it's rock and roll, everybody's hanging out.
Yeah.
But there's actually really something that's going on.
Yes.
We're providing a service. We're of service to you.
Yeah.
You have service to your artist.
Yep.
Your artist is of service to the fans.
Exactly.
And if that equation is being adhered to and paid attention to professionally, you can be loose and chill.
100%.
And to the untrained eye, it can look like this loose rock and roll moment. So
I think it should be this passive thing, right? So I always talk about that when I'm producing, like, I'm sure you guys have heard this thing. Like my friends always like, oh, can I come to the studio and hang out? I'm like, no, because it's not hanging out like you think it is. Front-facing it is, right? Like it looks like if you were to put a camera in the studio with me on a daily basis, it probably looks like pretty casual overall, but should be a passive experience, right? Because if everyone gets too hyper-focused on something and it becomes like this strange awareness in the room, it almost sort of ruins the moment that we're trying to chase, you know?
Yeah.
So the same thing happens if I were to come to mastering. When I attend mastering, it's sort of like, oh yeah, we're here having coffee and kind of talking about the song, and it's very passive and creative, but there is the process we're talking about, which is staying aware of what you just said, serving the artist, the fans, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So when we ran into you at NAMM, there was great chemistry that happened.
Yeah.
We met you there, we talked. You started telling us about an artist. Your artist, you're mixing, you have confidence in some areas of your sonics. Other areas you question.
Totally.
That's the value of a relationship with guys like us. So who is the artist that you're talking about and what's the song?
Yes.
Tell us a bit about it.
Great.
Maybe tell us a few things that will help guide us into
Love that.
dialing it up.
Totally. So the artist is a guy named Connor Kaufman. He's on Virgin Records. He just signed. I'm working on 3 songs on his debut record. And this is one of them that I produced. Typically when I produce something, I do end up mixing it. Not always, but a lot of time, if I'm heading production, I just kind of finish it off, right? It's kind of part of the deal. So this particular song I produced from, and wrote with him actually from the ground. We wrote it, I produced it, and now I mixed it. Sometimes it's difficult doing that when you start from nothing, literally just like a blank screen and a guitar, and now a month later we have this huge production with all these elements, and then I mixed it, and there's elements as a producer that were great, but then when I went to mix it, I'm like, man, this is actually kind of a difficult thing to mix, right? That I wasn't bothered by when I was producing the song because it's like, it sounds great, and it does, but as a mixer, specifically the low end in this song is really interesting because during the verses, it's only this sub 808 sound, and then during the choruses, there's no 808, there's a sub bass, but a natural bass where they take stage of the low end. So obviously those fill up incredibly different places. In the production, it sounds really cool because the chorus gets all grungy and distorted and fun, and the verses have this really pop sort of sensibility to it, could be because of the clean 808 thing. So that felt good during production, but when I was mixing it, it became a real struggle. and if I'm being honest, I don't know if I got it right yet. So we're going to find that out today.
We're going to find out. And so much of this is revealed just by listening to it. We can have conversations.
Yes.
We can talk and use a bunch of different adjectives to describe what something might sound like. But really what it comes down to is really listening to it. Sure. And one thing that's of value in the mastering process is to have an objective ear. Because you've been in laser focused in this.
Yes.
The first thing that comes to mind as you say that, to me at least, is maybe you have it really dialed in for the verse, and maybe you also have it really dialed in for the chorus, but maybe that transition doesn't necessarily gel.
No, I think that's actually right. I think that's actually what I'm struggling with, is each section feels good, low-end wise speaking, but transitioning from one to the other and back and forth, because it ebbs and flows a song, obviously, I'm not sure if it's there. Maybe it is. I mean, I hope it is. We've landed on this for now. Like the mix that I brought with me is the one that everyone seems to be very happy with, including the label. Me being me, I've listened to it and I'm like, is this good? Right? Is this right? Is it the best? I don't know.
So you came in about 15 minutes ago. We dialed up the song. We've got it set up in our playback workstation, externally clocked, going into a D to A converter, going into our console to get digitally captured, again, with all of our settings in the analog domain.
Great.
So the first order of business is to take a listen to the song, feel it out, discuss it.
Right.
And one of the real benefits of this relationship is you're emotionally connected to the music. You're invested. You've got the relationship with your artist. Our relationship is objective.
Yes.
Our relationship is with you. And it really works because you would like that objectivity. We are very fortunate to have somebody like you invested with the artist, so you can really guide the process.
Sure.
And when that combines, you end up with something that's really great for the fans.
Great.
So let's check it out.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
All right. So while we switched cameras to the front of the console so that you can have a clearer view of what it is we're doing, we took advantage of the time to work on the song. Mike left the room so that we could objectively listen and come up with some opinions. Ruben and I heard the track the same way. There are some issues on the low end. The way that I personally look at this kind of music is the low end, the bass guitar in general should really hold up the melodic structure of the track. The kick then supports that bass, and then it should bloom out and air out. So we've got abilities on our console to work with that low end, tighten it up, use equipment in the solid state region for that, use some 2BQ to really open it up and air it out and just have that shine. But the track really lights up the room. So we have an opportunity here to talk about whether or not Mike should go back and maybe make some tweaks so that we can then do a better job, because that is part of the process. You know, do we want to have you go back? Because this is not a personal thing. This is business. And so if you can go back and make some tweaks, you can do that, and then we can do a better job. But in this case, both Ruben and I feel that that is not necessary, and we can actually get to work on the track. There are some challenges, so now that Mike's back in the room, we can discuss that, and then maybe even together come to the determination if a tweak needs to be made or not. Ruben was of the opinion that there should be some filtering on the low end for the 808, and perhaps that would glue it all together. So now that Mike's in the room, we'll take a listen to all of this stuff.
Great. I love it.
And we'll take it from there. So really, if you guys want to talk about the technical aspect of what to do and what we did while you were out of the room, and maybe how much further we can take it from here.
Great. Well, I'm glad that you mentioned the fact that you were not sure about the low end.
Yeah.
And usually when that's the case, it's usually on point, you know?
Yeah.
This room is extremely revealing. It's very well tuned. We spent, frankly, years and years refining the tuning of this room. So everything is very apparent once you hear it through the speakers. There's nothing that's a question in our minds. We just know exactly where everything sits. When it comes to the low end, it's punchy, it's powerful. The production, by the way, is fantastic.
Thank you.
It really is.
Thank you.
And it's not off the mark. It's just that we need to do a little bit extra work to make it feel all congealed.
Totally.
And when we, so what we did is we did a pass without filtering the bottom end.
Okay.
We found a nice shape. We found that we did rides between verses and choruses to make sure the choruses really bloomed out, kind of dialed back the verses. And with those rides, everything felt in context. But building from the support without the filter, my ear was going a little bit towards the 808 and the, too much. And I feel that maybe Gavin felt the same way.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it also felt good at the same time. So we made the print, and we often do this. We'll make a print knowing that, so that we can then make an adjustment and then make another print and A/B against where we started to make sure that that was a good idea. And this is so much part of the mastering process. You do something, you learn something along the way, you're figuring out the rides as you go through, you develop opinions that informs your next decisions, you get more opinions, and then you whittle down to this thing until you feel like you don't want to touch it anymore.
Yeah.
And that's the key, by the way, to this relationship, because you're not going to do that on your end.
No.
And what you give to the artist isn't going to include that type of detailed approach.
Right.
So now we're here to do that so that when you do give something to the artist, there's a bit of a wow factor that happens. It's not like a situation where they go, oh, cool, it's this great slight improvement. This is now an incredibly detailed approach.
Yes.
Where you're looking at the elements of the low end, and even in our case, with the chain of gear that we have, that we can shape exactly that, and bring out some bass guitar stuff, leave the 808 where it's supposed to be.
Great.
So that we don't just kind of do some sort of global low end thing and then all of a sudden that thing, overpowers the track.
Yeah, the production, speaking more like, I guess, big picture, or not a big picture, but I guess just more speaking about the process, was that the ideology behind the production of the song after we wrote it was Connor and I agreed we wanted the verses and the bridge to be hip hop sort of production. And then the choruses are this distilled, just massive rock and roll, big power chord sides, the whole, you will hear in the song. And I think we nailed that 100%. That presented challenges on the technical side of things that weren't presented during the production. As a matter of fact, the production for everyone was so excited. The label loved it. It was exactly what we wanted to go from verses and choruses. And it's actually one of my favorite songs on the album, and his too, because I think it encapsulates what he's doing as an artist, right? This more pop hip hop approach, but having these massive hooks. So I think we got there on the production of it, but it's funny because nobody really knew behind the scenes my struggle with the low end issue of what popped up because of that,
Right.
Well, one of the things you can do, in our case, we did 2 versions of it. Now that you're back in the room and we can take a listen to that, you could say, look, let's edit the bridge from this version and the chorus from this version.
Great.
So this can happen all the time. And if you're at home with plugins, you can actually automate stuff like that, or you can make edits. This is a very reasonable thing to do. So,
Sure, that's great.
especially, and you produced the song, you wrote the song, and you arranged it.
Right.
So you're talking about that. So you were the one to decide that.
100% I was.
And we
very intimately, yeah.
Yeah, and our relationship is that we can do different versions, but then we have that more detailed discussion about where to go.
So cool.
To end up with that final thing.
Right.
Where it's not really revealing as to what we did. You just listen to the track and you relate to it.
I think there's some element of magic that should happen to the artist. Do you know what I'm saying? But
the listener should never feel like we did anything.
No, that's what I mean. It should be completely passive.
It just that connection with that audio, and that's the ultimate goal in all of this.
It's the ultimate goal because you want to just experience the music. You want to have ultimate connection to the music. So we're not there to dazzle you with how our processing sounds. Our processing is there to create that connection, and that's where we leave it. Then we've done our best job. It doesn't mean that we don't do a whole lot to it, but to the listener, you won't be aware of that. You'll be aware of just connecting to the band, the music, production, everything, all the music.
Yeah.
I was just saying, this is the value of the relationship now that we've had this discussion and we're in each other's heads a bit, and that objectivity on this side and the emotional connection to the music this side is all combined. You want to take a listen to the way we heard it?
Oh, please.
And let's see what you think
Absolutely,
of that.
please, yes.
We should do that, but just for context, let's play a verse and a chorus of just the flat mix, and then we'll jump to the first pass, explain that out.
Okay.
Jump to the second pass, explain that out with the high pass filter.
Great.
And then we'll do a real-time print of what it is.
Love it. Great. Sounds great to me.
Let's do it.
So this is the mix, Untreated. I'm just going to play...
This is what I brought in today.
Yes, this is what you brought in today. I'm going to play just the second verse into the chorus.
Perfect.
My veins are running so cold, blood stains all of my clothes. Still, I miss you more than you know. Over again, oh. 'Cause I remember how you taste, now I'm bleeding over again. Yeah, I can't forget the way you faked it. All these voices in my head, always whispering where'd you go. I can only love you with my eyes. Praying when I die, I'll be with you. I'm hollow without you, it's harder to breathe. Don't wanna wake up while drowning my sleep. Only love you with my eyes closed. Sleep just to be.
Yeah, then we drop back into the 808 thing in the bridge,
Yes.
It's, in the second verse, there was a version of the song where I had a bass guitar line, and it just didn't do the same thing for the song. Like everyone agreed instantly after we spent like maybe an hour on it. Like that's not it. It just got to go back to the hip hop thing.
Got it.
And it does feel good. Like I'm glad we didn't do, because I remember what it was with the band. They just didn't do the same thing. It made the chorus not feel as, I mean, different. Really, if you know, it really is this side A, side B sort of song. You know,
and you know, hearing this one more time, just the mix without any processing, it's very revealing to me that when the chorus hits, it doesn't really feel like it expands as far as it wants to after coming out of the verse.
100%.
And so we did a little bit of this and that to ride into, relatively back off the verse, so that we can then come back for the chorus, and you'll feel that expand as soon as I play this for you.
But what's amazing about this is that chorus is present. It lights up the room. It's there. There's enough to work with here. You don't have to go back and tweak this.
Yeah.
But, you know, now that we are in this environment, we can really extract that and make that impact happen.
Totally.
Make that listener really relate and follow the dynamic range, drive along and sing to this, you know. All the elements are there.
Right.
The bass, everything, it's all there. Now we just have to tune it, you know.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
I did this thing in the chorus, and I'm wondering if you guys were able to discern it or if it was lost on anyone except me. I do this mid-sides thing with the guitars in the chorus only. Mm-hmm. In other words, in the verses, things are panned, I believe like 75% out or something. And then the choruses, I process the guitars in mid-sides. So you got this, well, I wanted it to feel wider than you could potentially hear. You know what I'm saying? I wanted to really bloom out in the chorus and then get this big middle part as well. I didn't do that in the verses purposely. Was that something that either you struggled with or that you noticed and then was good? I'm just curious.
For me, it was a visceral thing. You know, now that you're saying it, I didn't think of it that way.
Okay.
But what I did think, we can do stuff to make those choruses really jump. There's something in there that allows us to do that.
Right. So
So I felt
you discern the information that I'm talking about.
Felt something. It was more like, we've got something to work with here instead of, can you go back and make this thing jump a little more?
Cool. Great.
You did that.
Yeah.
And there was something that we felt in that let us feel that we could work with this.
Awesome.
And this is an important point, because as you're working at home with plugins and making decisions like this, it's one thing to mix a track, and then most likely you're going to do this process to your mix by yourself in the room. And hopefully this information, it helps you decode how to make these types of decisions.
Yeah.
So here we are breaking this down in a more detailed way than you might be in your own living room, mixing, mastering, doing all that stuff. You've got to be able to make these decisions. And if there's some way to make that chorus jump out, even if people don't feel it, go for it. You know, do the stuff that it takes.
And just this dynamic just between the two of you just happened. You know, the fact that Gavin sensed it in a way, but not in the detail that you did, because you did it. And we're objective now.
Yes.
So there's some benefit there, because we don't know what's behind the curtain so much. All that we know is what's coming out of the speakers. We don't know what happened necessarily.
Right.
But it's going to hit us in the right ways anyway. It's going to leave us with a certain impression of where it currently is. And in our mind's eye, we project where it can be in its best form.
Sure.
At least in our subjective best form. Yeah. And then we'll plot that from point A to point B, take it there, and light up the space.
Great.
And that's where we leave it.
Yeah.
So whether it was mid-side or not, it's creating a connection. You know, it's going to create. It has an intent. It's got to rock your socks off, fill up the space.
Totally.
And that's all.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, like, I don't necessarily care if nobody will know it's mid-side. It doesn't matter. It's more for my process. Like, did this work? Because if it worked, maybe it's something that I can apply in later in my productions.
Sure.
This is an important conversation to have, and this is what happens all the time. And luckily, we have 3 people here discussing this, but a lot of times you're on your own making these decisions.
Totally.
Earlier, you said, I did this thing and I nailed it.
Yeah.
It's related to what you're talking about. You've got to feel a confidence that is enough that you brought the track in.
Precisely.
So that's something I would inspire the viewers to adhere to. You know, bring that confidence to your mix. Separate yourself from it. Come back to it.
And this was an interesting one. I'm glad we're working this one, because it's a good example for the viewers of the video where I'm incredibly confident in what I got here with the artist, but I did know there was an issue technically that if I'm being honest, I don't think the artist discerns, but I think when he hears it, when it's finished, he'll know something changed for the better. Does that make sense?
Certainly.
Like, again, it's the Oz sort of effect, I call it, you know, like the Wizard of Oz effect.
I mean, we're so hyper-focused in all of these things, you know, and I'm not sure if you've had this experience. I do all the time. I listen to records that I grew up with, and I hear them much differently now as an audio professional that's been doing this for a long time. You know, that never occurred to me at the time. In fact, a lot of times these records sounded larger than life, and then I heard them, I said, that's what that sounds like?
That's what it sounds like,
So that gives you a view into a lot of times what people might perceive without sitting in chairs like this every day.
I just had that experience yesterday. I was in a session producing a song, and we referenced a Weezer song, El Scorcho, which I love that song. But we were like, oh, let's bring it up real fast. I'm like, great. So I brought up my monitors, and I was like, this doesn't like sound good. Like, how is that possible? Like, this was like my childhood. This was like the biggest song I remember. Like, oh, it was that huge rock song. Yeah, it sounded cool, but it didn't sound the way that I thought it did. I haven't heard that song. I didn't listen to it in years. We just happened to bring it up yesterday, and I'm like, oh, I love that song. Let's bring it up. I haven't listened to the song in years. And I was like, it doesn't really sound the way I thought. And I had to readjust my brain to that for a moment. Do you know what I'm saying?
So it didn't change, you did.
Yeah.
You're in the business of sonics, but the material gripped you.
Right, but I was
and it's lived inside.
I still love that song. I just, as a producer now, knowing more than I did when I was a kid, I know things about it that I almost like are applying to it that don't need to be applied. Because viscerally, I still react to the song, I'm like, oh, it's such a big chorus. Listen to this chorus, and I was so fun listening to it. But in turn, I'm like, this doesn't sound the way I remembered it does. But I still love that. That song viscerally still did something to me, even yesterday, you know?
Yeah.
So what I'm going to play you now is the first version we printed. That is with what I was explaining, a little bit punchy, a little bit too much punchy in the low end, and the kick in the 808 aspect. It sounds balanced at the same time, but it allowed us to get a little further down the road and learn the track as we did it.
Cool.
So I'm going to play that first. I'm going to play the same section, that verse into the chorus.
Yes.
Here we go.
My veins are running so cold. Blood stains all of my clothes. Still, I miss you more than you know. Over again, oh. 'Cause I remember how you taste. Now I'm bleeding Novocaine. Yeah, I can't forget the way you faked it. All these voices in my head always whispering where'd you go. I can only love you with my eyes.
So instantly better, in my opinion.
Good.
The things I discerned instantly, and I'm sure if I listen to it again in a moment, which I think we will, I'll have even more detailed notes. But the first thing I noticed was in the verse, that snare sound effect that I had sounds way cooler now. So it sounds more, just, I felt it. The other time I heard it in my mix, it was this thing on the 2s and 4s that happens, just, it's like the sample thing that I did. And I always liked it, but I like where it sits better now. It just sort of explodes a bit more to the sides and makes it a bit more exciting. But the main thing I discerned was the chorus low end was not as far off from the verse low end. And there's a sub bass that I have in the chorus that I also processed in mid sides with the guitars to support the sides a bit more. Because that was one of the biggest things was the bass, the natural bass of the middle obviously can't do the mid sides thing that I was doing because it's a mono instrument, right? Rather than the guitars or stereo. So I threw a sub bass in the sides that's doing some sub information, and the mix just wasn't, there was some distance between not melodic differences, but some sort of like sonic difference between the natural bass and the sub bass on the sides. That feels very glued now. What I just heard felt very glued.
And one thing that I picked up on that you said, which I love, which is always our goal and our intent, is you heard it before, now you felt it.
Yeah, first.
That's everything to what we can bring in what we do and how we do it. It's always a musical process, and we're always feeling that we're going for that connection.
Yes,
you want to feel it.
Yeah,
that's all that matters.
That's all that matters. Yeah, and you're right. When I was talking about my mix, I was talking very technically, and then when I heard your master, I instantly switched to feel mode,
now
you know?
Now you're talking about the music.
That's correct, right? I'm talking about musically, yeah. And it's nice to get out of that. That just goes to show how in doubt I've been with the song for the last couple of weeks working on it. Because instantly when I didn't hear my exact version, I was like, I can just feel this again. I don't have to worry about that.
Now, if you're at home and you're the mixer and the mastering engineer and the producer and everybody, like a lot of people watching this course, a lot of the viewers are, these three people are one person. What you guys are saying is that you're talking about the technical aspect of music making, of production. And once you get to our process, you're talking about the song, the music.
Yeah.
You're shifting it. So, so separate yourself from it, move away from it, and bring yourself back in and let it be felt. So you can get caught up in the technicals and you can come up with your own techniques and your own, chain of events and all that stuff. But at this point, you're talking about the music. Even in the languaging, even in the conversations we're having, we're talking about the music. We're not talking about how much stuff we did.
No. I mean, I was saying this earlier off camera about how when I get questions online or even from my interns like that, I think they want my answers to be more technical, But if I'm being honest, I'm not a very technical person. I'm just not. I think it's a bit of a disappointment where they're looking for something more technical. And I'm like, I don't know. I just did this because it felt good.
But what you do have is the ability, as we always say, to go to the end, start at the end and work backwards. What does this need to be?
Right.
So you don't have to be technical. You just have to know how to use the tools enough to get to that point, to fulfill that vision.
I think sometimes having so much technical knowledge can get in the way of the felt process.
If you start thinking about the technical,
that's what I'm saying. If you start to focus on that instead,
and stop thinking about the song,
you know,
because a producer, in my opinion, a great producer is somebody. As I say, you break down the process. We're talking about the music. Will have that dialogue in their head as you're talking about the technical. Always thinking of all things combined.
And it's like just a musician as well. When Jimi Hendrix is on stage, he's soloing, he's riffing, but he's not thinking about which notes to play when. Really, he's feeling through it and the notes appear. He could listen to it later, a recording of it later, and say, oh, I must have done that because this, that, and the other, and explain it with the technical
kind of break himself down.
Foundation of it, but that's all there just sitting in his back pocket. But he's not relying on that. That's already done. He already did all of that. Now he's working with the music, and that's what we do too. We know that this should go before this and how this integrates with that, and we're going to explain that talking about technical.
That's great, and I love that.
We're going to break it down, but that's in our back pocket. That's just known. It's in our bones. Now we just do the work, and we can rely on that to reinforce and back up our decisions, but it's not leading our decisions all the time.
It's not. As a matter of fact, I was saying that this song actually came together really wonderful. Like, we did one day of writing. We wrote the whole song in a day to some demo production stuff that I had done. We spent 2 days producing it, and then I spent a day doing a mix. You know, all in all, it was like from the conception of it, which was just like, I have this idea and I want to come into the studio and write with Mike. That was the email from the label. To the finishing, it was like a work week worth of time, really. You know, which is really, I think, a testament to how much we were shooting from our hip on this. And that's why I love it so much, is it's like, it's very much, the process was very felt. It was, there was no point where we're going back and stressing over this, or it was just like, oh, does it feel good? It's good. Does it feel good? It's good. It feels good. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's going to end up hopefully doing well. It's definitely going to be a single, because I think everyone feels that we went through the process kind of unapologetically. We even had, like I said, even the thesis statement, once it was written and I had a demo production going, that we all had this thesis statement of hip hop versus big rock choruses. Like, that was like the thing. And we all in the room felt that and knew that for the 2 days that we were producing the song out. And we never really looked back. We had that statement and we just went with it for a couple of days, and it feels great, you know? Like I said, I could go into technical stuff all day long, but that doesn't really matter, does it? I mean, in the end, it doesn't matter to the listener, you know, to his fans. It just feels like a song that's a great Connor Kaufman song.
The way to look at the technical stuff, in my opinion, because I as well don't approach from a technical point of view. I approach from a musical point of view, as does Ruben. The tools are there to facilitate a vision. That's the way we look at it. So I never want to learn too much, or, you know, I have a lot of knowledge just by being in the industry for so long technically, but I always make that secondary to the music.
Yes.
And I think that's really the key. And, you know, as you approach in your way and as we approach in our way, and as you combine that into one mind, is to always let the music be first.
That's and that's when the magic happens, I think. Yeah. Like in this room, the three minds come into one, and we start getting to the core vision of what we were going for, you know, a month ago when I started this with Connor, you know? Yeah.
So talking about technical for a second now.
Please, yeah.
So now we can do that.
No, I do want to hear about that, yeah.
So we ended up with a filter on the mix and then feeding into the console. But before that, we didn't have it on, which made us do different decisions on the board. Without that filter, we need to make sure that those guitars, the vocal, everything in terms of the melodic structure of where your ear wants to go was speaking above the chunky bottom.
Right.
So on the EQ, we opened up round 3 and 6 broadband for the chorus, and then backed off, you know, on the bus, creating resistance for the verse. And we'll demonstrate that in a second.
Awesome.
That's just a little, you know, short version of what we did. Along the way, we felt that we wanted to filter it.
Okay.
So after we made the first print without the filter, we threw on a filter only from the first chorus on, not for the intro. And I'll explain why in a second.
Please. Great.
And, you know, finding the right value of a filter, you have to kind of sweep it up and down and then change the shape of the EQ in relation to that and fine tune until you get that little green light in your head that says, good, don't touch it. Okay, and then we go up by 1/10 of a dB in terms of the filter, ended up on 27.1, 12 dB per octave. Great. That just felt right. We could find something different a little bit, and then this EQ would be different on the console. but the sense inside of us felt that this was just right.
Great.
So I'm going to play you the same section there.
Can I add some context to this for
Sure.
the viewers real quick? So it's to be noted that the filtering is done at the playback, at the file itself, before it sees the analog console. Next is the tube equalizer, in which we're doing the high end and really letting the song bloom with some saturation. From there, it goes into the console where it's dropped a dB. And you'll see a lot of this on the course material. And we go from there into a solid state equalizer in which we're shaping the low end, giving it a little bump at the higher low end and a little cut at the lower low end just to create a little bump. And that works in combination with the filter at the, before the tube equalizer, before all the air and stuff like that we added to the track. So just to add some context into the technical aspect of how we arrived where we did.
Yes.
I just wanted
That
to add
helps me too.
Thank you.
I didn't know. That sounds great. I like to know that too. So
And so...
And that's not to mention the rest of the chain, the limiters and so forth. That also comes. But I just wanted to talk about the EQ shaping.
And so, sorry, not to get off subject. No, I guess it's not a subject. You apply the filter at the track level. Is that what you're saying?
At
Correct?
the source.
At the source level, right? In Pro Tools, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
in the
yeah.
box.
Yeah. And that is generally how I also, when I'm finishing a mix, like when I'm mixing, I have outboard gear, but I'm doing EQ moves and stuff in the box and then sending it out to outboard as well. So that's kind of...
And this is important, is to where in the chain, because a lot of people have several pieces of gear. In our case, we have several pieces of gear in the chain. We use a little bit of each instead of one or two and a lot of each. You know, that's the approach. So a lot of people have that. So, the chain of events and the gain structure between the modules is crucial to the sonic aspect of the final print.
So when we threw on that filter and fine-tuned it, we found that because of that, it took a different shape on the tube EQ here.
Okay.
And it's not simply just getting a setting first and then saying, it could use some filtering. Let's see if that's better. No, that's going to change everything.
Yes.
So we work it off. We introduce it, then we flour that in. And until we find a place where we don't want to touch it anymore, like I was saying. So in this case, because that filter was in, I got a little more emphasis around 120 than I did before.
Okay.
And because the filter is opening up, because it's filtering the bottom, the opening up top and the upper mids is happening a little bit more so we don't have to do that as much here. So it's all just a balancing act. I'll play the same section right here and you can experience that.
My veins are running so cold. Blood stains all of my clothes. Still, I miss you more than you know. Over again, oh. 'Cause I remember how you taste. Now I'm bleeding over again. Yeah, I can't forget the way you faked it. All these voices in my head, always whispering where'd you go. I can only love you with my eyes.
So sorry, I instantly heard that difference. And I like it better. The chorus feels maybe less congested. Is that an okay word for
Certainly.
it? In the like almost like where the vocal is blooming a little bit better.
Yes.
Is almost. But I know it's a low end function that we changed, but the vocal feels better as well.
Everything.
Yeah, everything
One thing
feels
affects
more.
everything.
It feels more a little bit more open and it blooms a bit better in the chorus.
There's more room for the elements outside of the 808.
For sure.
So,
right.
And it's funny, as we're getting detailed listening, and as we all have our own opinions, I'm wondering what a vocal up by a few tenths might sound like on this in the chorus.
In the chorus itself.
Only in the chorus.
Yeah.
Maybe 5 tenths, maybe 3 tenths.
Sure.
Not more than that, but just a little something.
Sure, just a tickle a bit more.
Just a tickle, right. So this is the stuff you learn. You work, you get into it, you visualize the music, you use the tools to visualize the music, and then one thing informs the other. As Ruben pointed out, when you change the low end, you have to feather the high end into that. It's not just like I changed the low end, and then it's like okay, and then you listen some more, and now I'm thinking vocal up, and you could provide that.
Sure.
And we could say, no, let's not do that.
That happens a lot too.
Yeah, sure. Where we think that's a path to go down and we retract from it.
One thing informs the other, you know?
Yes.
You know, we don't know that we're going to get a little more 120, a little less 6 until we throw that on and feel into it until it feels right. And then it's like, oh yeah, that's what I did. You know, that's really
Totally, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But the balance of what I just heard was pretty spot on as far as what I gave you guys, I should say, and what I would love back. Like that's pretty much the balance that I would expect.
So the only notes you're going to give us is a thank you note.
Yeah, maybe a bottle of wine. I mean, you know,
That's the kind of notes we like.
So I'm gonna ride the whole thing through.
Okay, great.
With the filtered version.
Awesome.
Keep in mind that the filter only kicks in at the first chorus, but you'll see why it.
I was about to ask you, but I'd rather watch and then ask later.
I'm gonna do some rides, some pretty big rides here at the intro, and ride into that first chorus.
And I'm sorry, I don't know.
So I was gonna let Gavin explain that.
Well, it's what I touched on before. So the D to A digital to analog converter is playing the track back through universal audio interface, an antelope external clock into a benchmark digital to analog converter. From there, it goes directly into the EAR equalizer, the way we have set the chain for this song. Then from there, it goes into our console, in which we attenuate 1 dB before it goes into everything else that's in the chain, which is the solid state EQ, the limiters, and we actually even have a de-esser in the chain, not because there's a problem with de-essing, but what it allows us to do is at the front of the chain for this tube EQ to open the track up and feel the air and the breathability and the blooming. We can open it up further, and then at the end of the chain, clamp it down with the de-esser, so you get this awesome openness without it cutting your head off.
Really cool.
So it's like a de-esser. It's a de-esser to be used with the EQ as a part of the EQ.
Really cool.
Not because the track needs de-essing. We do that fairly frequently.
It's a way to also achieve fullness in bottom. People are surprised by that, but it starts its roll at around 2.4K. It's like the mids.
Okay, yeah, mid 100.
So in regards to what Ruben referred to with making rides, this is our left and right attenuator 1 dB steps. It's very common that in a song like this where the chorus expands and the verse is tucked in, even some of you mentioned Weezer before, they're great at that.
They are. Yes.
And
if you listen to my productions, you can very obviously hear my Weezer influence. Not this one particularly, but just my work in general. Yeah.
Well, one thing we can do here that can also be accomplished if you're working at home in the box. You can also do this with edits. You can do this with automation. We do it old school OG analog, which is that if we set the limiters and the chain to accommodate a portion of the song, we'll find that if you go to a loud or a soft section, everything changes. So what we do is we follow the dynamic range. So if the chorus drops a dB, we'll drop it a dB, so that the limiters are always triggering accurately.
Okay.
And you're following the dynamic of the song. So to the untrained eye, you might think we're dropping it a dB. But in fact, what we're doing is we're following your dynamic range.
That's awesome.
We're not dropping it a dB. We're keeping it where it is.
So cool. Yeah.
We're chasing it. So we do that. And then occasionally, like what Ruben's going to do here in the intro, he wants to take it a little further, but you're in the room.
Yeah.
So we're not doing it blind and we hope you like it. You're here to hear it. You can say, stop the presses. Let's redo that. Or you can say, I love it. I wish I'd thought of that.
Totally.
Anything can happen. That's the benefit. And this video has a lot to do with the relationship that happens and the decisions that get made.
Right.
So that's what he was referring to. And that in the chain of events, that's where the left and right attenuators happen.
Right.
They do not affect the tube EQ in the beginning, but that's in there. So it's taken into account as these decisions are made.
Okay.
But these decisions don't affect that directly, just indirectly.
Okay. Great. Wonderful explanation. Thank you. Yeah.
So
let me get out of let me get out of the sweet spot here. Yeah.
And here's all the rides.
Name in the mirror 3 times you don't appear. I'm replaying all of the tears over again, over again. Oh, no one could be your replacement. Our hearts are locked in the basement, too heavy. Now I'm just breaking over again, over again. Oh, I can only love you with my eyes closed.
That's awesome. I loved watching it. It was like you're playing an instrument.
That's how it's
I'm
got
going
to
to
be.
take that as a thank you note.
Oh no, that I loved that. Everything you did there, I was responding to, and yeah.
It is like an instrument because, these are not detinted. A lot of times we're doing subtle little rides on this, feeling into it, seeing how it blooms into the compression, all the dynamic process, how everything's working with one another. All the elements within the chain are working as in concert. And you'll notice I was way down for the beginning of it.
I did notice that.
The choruses are at -1 dB.
Yeah.
For all the reasons that Gavin explained. The beginning part is at -5. Then
it is
all the way, so that's a 4 dB difference relative.
So that's an alteration of your mix that we, instead of calling you on the phone and saying, hey, how's this, how's that, can we do this? And then you go, I don't know, you're here, sitting here, listening, let's just do it. And you hear it. And you either like it or you don't.
And I did.
And you did.
I did, very much so.
So this again ties into the purpose of this video for these viewers. And that is that you've got 3 different levels of consciousness here. And if you're got these 3 people all in one person's mind, how you battle through the process of figuring out what to do. Hopefully this is informative in how to break down these processes. And always thinking of the music.
And you know what? It's funny when I was sitting there watching you go up in that chorus, when that vocal happens, for some reason I was reminded that was his original vocal from the day of Bounce that we did. We tried to cut the vocal a couple of days later, and he just didn't get there. But I forgot about that until I saw you. I don't know what happened when you were doing that. I was like, oh man, I forgot. That was like his original vocal that we cut that day. Whenever we were doing, I was responding to it viscerally. Like, I haven't thought about that for a month, probably. that's the vocal.
Well, and now that we heard the track down, I no longer feel like I would want to call you and say, hey, can you give us 3/10 up or something like that on the vocal? It lit up the room. It spoke. I heard all the elements.
Yeah.
The mid-range and the melodic structure was there. It bloomed out. The low end held up. The high end, it was put in context with the filtering that Ruben chose. And a bass guitar element really helped that vocal. The vocals no doubt. All the elements were there. These are the ways to think of the music and then use the tools to get there.
Right. Yeah, I was watching you, but I was listening more than I was watching. Because I knew if I was listening, I would discern something that I didn't like, or in this case, that I did like, Yeah. But that is very interesting, though. Okay, I have a question. When you have to recall something, is that not a total pain, then?
No, it's all documented.
We document everything.
Well, I mean, just those movements, though.
We have ways of plotting it, like -5, -4, -1, then back to -2.
Okay.
And we have a shorthand for that, too.
Okay.
With pinpointed accuracy.
That's awesome.
We have to, because
that's what I was wondering.
a different project every day, 12, sometimes 20 songs a day, every day.
Of course.
So, you can't rely on your memory.
No, there's no way. And I knew you were obviously making recall sheets. I was just wondering, because that's such a, I was watching you play the song, which was quite fun for me as a producer to watch you play my mix of it.
Yes.
That was just, it was really fun to me to watch that, but I'm also wondering, what if we had to recall that? How would he?
It's a combination of documenting the setting, like anybody does, but also we kind of know what we do.
Sure.
So immediately, as soon as we hear something, be like, oh yeah, I probably did this, that, and the other, because we approach it in a musical way and we know how we get there.
But you have a session folder. You have a client folder when you work with us, and it's there permanently. And lots of things go in it, including documentation for the music, deliverables made, all kinds of stuff.
Sure.
Included in that is a PDF made on an iPad with a pencil in which we write down.
I saw you doing that earlier.
All the stuff.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
So, and it's great because, if we work on a Friday and then we're back at home on a Saturday and you call up and say, hey, what'd you do? It's on the cloud. We can just pull it up on our phone and say, oh yeah, I must have done this, done the, okay, so here, Michael, I did this.
Really cool.
And it's right there for us.
That's very cool to me. Just as I'm just an organization freak myself. In my Pro Tools sessions, I have a plugin that keeps all of my outboard photos attached to a plugin that's inside of the session. And that's
the old school, like they used to do that with Polaroids. I don't know if the new generation knows this, but when I came up, there was a Polaroid camera in the studio, and all the gear was photos were taken, and those Polaroids went in the tape boxes.
That's wild.
That's how far I go back.
That's wild. That's a whole nother level of organization that I don't know if Well, it's interesting you're saying that, though, about the movement going back and forth, because you're right. If somebody were to show me one of my productions, like, what did you do in that chorus? I'd be like, I would be able to hear it and tell what I did because I knew I would be able to
know how you
deconstruct
work.
my own. I would be able to deconstruct. Oh, that's that guitar with this sub bass patch probably, and I would be able to discern what I did. Yeah.
Now, if we would have taken, just to kind of a little further on that, I know Gavin has something to say about this too, but if we were to make those rides post the limiter at the very end between verse and chorus, they would sound much different. It would sound way less musical, frankly. It would sound a little bit more jagged and more like you might hear that.
Right.
The beauty of doing it pre the dynamic processes is the fact that hypothetically, we were at -1 for the chorus. That's where the song's climaxing, in those choruses. The verses, they're backed off a dB relative before the compression and the limiting.
Right.
So,
yes.
And the reason being is that when you're full tilt at where we set it for the choruses,
Yes.
all the compressors are hugging in and hugging the signal in a way that we feel is just right for it. And then when we back it off for the verse, there's less level hitting everything. So those compressors and limiters release and the overall level comes up a little bit too, just a little bit. So this is part of compensating for that and also allowing for the appropriate amount of bloom. In another context, we might be a 2 dB relative ride. If that's what,
instead of a 4 dB relative ride.
or for that intro, but even between the verse and the chorus, which is currently 1, we could have another mix where we have to go a little further. Or if we have to get really detailed and those values aren't specific enough, we'll draw it in with Pro Tools gain in combination with ride gain.
It was interesting you said it because I was watching you turn, especially from the intro to that first chorus.
Yes.
I watched the movement look more extreme than what I was hearing.
Yes.
There was a certain softness. It was beautiful what was happening.
Yes.
I discerned it and it was a beautiful thing, but it was not a harsh, like if you were to turn on or off a light, you're very aware of that, rather than if you slowly fade a light, somebody may not notice that it was like that, where it was very soft. The difference happened in the same way, but not all at once where it was like this shocking sort of thing that happened to my mix. It was like it was very beautiful how it transitioned into that, which is part of the thing that I was slightly unhappy with coming in. The transition between the low end and the leveling was a little bit odd to me, but that movement, watching it softened everything a bit. Like the attack release of the whole mix felt better to me,
Yeah.
So what you're saying, in summary, to some degree, is that, you felt good about the music.
Yes.
And now you're, having gone through this experience, you feel a bit more peace about the sonic aspect of it.
Definitely feel more peaceful about it for sure. Yeah. No more sleepless nights. Yeah.
So in summary, if a song is great and doesn't sound great, you can work with that.
100%.
If a song is bad but sounds magnificent, no one will ever listen
No,
to
it doesn't. Exactly. Yeah.
So if you've got a song that's great, that sounds great, you've got gold.
Precisely.
So
So
that's
no truer words have ever been spoken.
that's in summary.
No truer words.
And with that, we'll see you out there in the field.
That's right.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone.